Joe Hines, take it away.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate your attendance this evening and looking forward to sharing some important information with you. This subject is pretty near and dear to my heart, and I suspect it's important to you as well while you've joined us tonight. You know, the title on our presentation, Sustainability, but I like steak, is kind of an inside joke here in our household. I was teaching a class earlier this year in January, actually, in this subject at Whittier College with a group of undergraduates. And on a daily basis, I'd go into that classroom and I'd say, so based on what you're learning in here, what changes in the way that, you know, in your lifestyle, the way you live your life, are you willing to make? And I actually ended up coming up with a solution for, you know, something that I could do. And what I've actually ended up doing is I don't eat meat anymore. One of the things, if you get into this subject, that you would learn is that the agri-industry globally, especially livestock and especially cows, are one of the most prolific generators of methane that we have. In fact, if you look at it, methane actually far exceeds, on a combined perspective, all other emissions, and most of it coming from cows. Anyway, so the title, Sustainability, but I like steak, starts with that because, you know, I came home and I chatted with my wife, and I said, well, I don't think we should do this anymore. And her response was, but I like steak. I don't want to give that up. And what we're finding as marketers, as we go out there and work with consumers and try to sell our products, market our products or services to them, is that they really do want sustainability, but they want it at a price that doesn't hurt, meaning they don't want to pay a higher price point simply for sustainability. So a lot of what we're going to see tonight reflects on that. You know, what do we have to do as marketers to change our organizations and to lead consumers in a more virtuous path and still, you know, meet our responsibilities to future generations? So with that as a setup, I'd like to transition now into the presentation proper, and by starting a video for you now. Let me go to it.
Dear future generations, I think I speak for the rest of us when I say, sorry. Sorry we left you with our mess of a planet. Sorry that we were too caught up in our own doings to do something. Sorry we listened to people who made excuses to do nothing. I hope you forgive us. We just didn't realize how special the earth was, like a marriage gone wrong. We didn't know what we had until it was gone. For example, I'm guessing you probably know it as the Amazon desert, right? Well, believe it or not, it was once called the Amazon rainforest, and there were billions of trees there, all of them gorgeous, and oh, you don't know much about trees, do you? Well, let me tell you, trees are amazing. I mean, we literally breathe the air they are creating. They clean up our pollution, our carbon. They store and purify water, give us medicine that cures our diseases, food that feeds us, which is why I am so sorry to tell you that we burn them down, cut them down with brutal machines, horrific 40 football fields every minute. That's 50% of all the trees in the world gone in the last 100 years. Why? For this. And that wouldn't make me so sad if it weren't so many pictures of leaves on it. You know, when I was a child, I read how the Native Americans had such consideration for the planet that they felt responsible for how they left the land for the next 7 generations. Which brings me great sorrow, because most of us today don't even care about tomorrow. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we put profit above people, greed above need, the rule of gold above the golden rule. I'm sorry we use nature as a credit card with no spending limit, overdrafting animals to extinction, stealing your chance to ever see their uniqueness or become friends with them. Sorry we poison the ocean so much that you can't even swim in them. But most of all, I'm sorry about our mindset, because we have the nerve to call this destruction progress. Hey Fox News, if you don't think climate change is a threat, I dare you to interview the thousands of homeless people in Bangladesh. See, while you were in your penthouse nestled, their homes were literally washed away beneath their feet due to rising sea levels. And Sarah Palin, you said that you love the smell of fossil fuels. Well, I urge you to talk to the kids in Beijing who are forced to wear pollution masks just to go to school. So you can ignore this, but the thing about truth is, it can be denied, not avoided. So I'm sorry, future generations. I'm sorry that our footprint became a sinkhole and not a garden. I'm sorry that we paid so much attention to ISIS and very little to how fast the ice is melting in the Arctic. I'm sorry we doomed you, and I'm sorry we couldn't find another planet in time to move to. You know what? Cut the beat. I'm not sorry. This future is not accepted. Because an error does not become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We can redirect this. How? Let me suggest that if a farmer sees a tree that is unhealthy, they don't look at the we must globally warm our hearts and change the climate of our souls and realize that we are not apart from nature, we are a part of nature, and to betray nature is to betray us. To save nature is to save us, because whatever you're fighting for, racism or poverty, feminism, gay rights, or any type of equality, it won't matter in the least, because if we don't all work together to save the environment, we will be equally extinct. So,
Okay, so that video has a more eloquent way of opening this presentation than I ever could find for you. To move on, I kind of want to take a look at where did all of this come from. You know, we started our economy way back as hunters and growers and gatherers and warriors, etc. And this timeline shows how we created value and made a global economy over millennia. But if you notice, we really started to have a significant impact on things here about 1900. All of this shaded area here is gross world product, right? $71 trillion a year right now. But really starting about 1900 or so. Now with that growth in our economy, and there were some nations that became eco-debtors and some that are eco-creditors. The United States, as a matter of fact, maybe 10% of the world's population, if that, uses over 85% of all of the world's green or yellow or perhaps gray. These nations are eco-creditors, meaning that they use far less than maybe is their fair right to world resources. And so thinking about that opening video and the impact that marketing and development of economies has had on us from a natural perspective, I want to pause and say that, you know, life is very rare and very precious in our universe. The probability that life rose out of the early earth, you know, this primordial ooze, had the same probability that a tornado could go through a junkyard and somehow miraculously assemble a 747 jet. Statistically speaking, that's 1 over 10 to the 50th. Let me just pause. Okay, hang on a second, please. I don't know if folks can hear me or not. If anybody can, Greg, can you please unmute this for a moment and tell me if you guys can hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, that's good. Greg says he can't hear me. All right, I just got a text from Greg says he can't hear me. All right, so the probability that life ever occurred is 1 over 10 to the 50th. This is what that number looks like, you guys. That looks an awful lot to me like 0. Now, when we look at, 1900, right, and the formation of our modern economy, if you look at 1900 from 2 other perspectives, you'll see that it's been economic development that's driven us into the situation that we're in. You can see also with 1900 moving forward, this incredible explosion in terms of CO2 emissions that we have. And if you line these 2 curves up, which are 5-year running and 11-year running averages in global temperature, with that line, they're the same curve. The correlation is 1-to-1. It's almost perfect. So there's nothing we can't argue this. Now, when you ask Americans, well, how do you feel about this? Are you worried? We tend to get worried about the economy, and then we get worried about our environment. So what you see here are 2 curves. This green curve shows everyone who has expressed a great deal or a fair amount of concern over global warming since 1990 moving forward to 2016. And this yellow curve are the folks that said, not too worried about it. You can see here in 2008 or so, when the economic poop hit the fan, we had a significant drop-off in people who were concerned as people's other concerns shifted to, oh my goodness, how am I going to make my mortgage payments and feed my kids? However, since the economy has begun to right itself again, all other things holding equal, concern is returning back again to, oh my goodness, we're in a lot of trouble. And here's why we're in trouble. This article is, it's 4 years old in 2012. However, the most current data that I have found has said that things have actually started to progress in a much more rapid fashion than we were originally anticipating. So here are the numbers that we're concerned about. The first is 2 degrees Celsius. With an average rise of 2 degrees Celsius, we're going to experience longer droughts, more intense heat waves. Those 2 things are going to have a major impact on our ability to grow commercial agricultural crops and feed the world. Sea levels are going to rise with just 2 more degrees increase, which is going to flood American coastal communities, and we're going to see major population shifts in third world nations such as Bangladesh and India and Vietnam. So where are we right now? Right now we've raised the temperature half of that allowable 2 degrees Celsius. The next number that this article pointed out that people are still concerned about is the number 565. That's the number of gigatons that we can pump out into the atmosphere before we're going to tip the scale past 2 degrees. But the most terrifying number in this article was actually 2,800. And this is the number of gigatons of carbon that we're on track to release into the atmosphere. Not 565, but 2,800. So as people learn about this, and Americans are increasingly focusing on this issue, we're really concerned, as I showed you in those other charts. There's been an index put together called the Green Confidence Factor, or the Green Confidence Index, and there are three factors to it. Those three factors include responsibility, meaning are you personally taking responsibility for your actions and behavior? Are you living in a different fashion than you used to because of the threat? The number two, sufficient information. Do you and I have enough information available to us so that when we go out and purchase things, we're buying responsibly? And the third component in this Green Confidence Index is your past and your future purchase behavior as a consumer. So let's look at some of the detail behind that. This first one is, are we doing enough? Are we taking responsibility to address issues appropriately? And the overall responsibility score that was measured out was 33.5%, meaning 33.5% of us feel like we're doing enough. If you say, how are you personally doing? People will say, well, you know, I think I'm doing quite well. 52% is the vote, is the score that comes out. But if you say, how's your neighbor doing? It's a much lower score. And then if you say, how is the government, local, state, and national doing? The scores fall even further. So to me, it seems really interesting that myself, I'm doing quite fine, thanks. It's everybody else's problem. There's something happening there. Number two factor is, do you have enough information to make proper purchasing decisions and be more responsible? The information score was just about 45%. And you can see that it varies by category. The highest scores were A in grocery, 2 in household care products, and 3 in your car or a vehicle that you're buying, where you have enough information. But we really don't feel like we have enough information as private investors, so that if you're buying into a stock or buying into a mutual fund or something else, do you have enough information to understand the management policies when it comes to sustainability? When you make a decision about, you know, apparel, do you have enough information about the brand of apparel that you might buy? And then third is looking at your past history in the way that you've bought before, and did you buy responsibly? Or looking forward, where do you think you're going? So from a future perspective, we're evaluating our future intent and behavior much better than we have evaluated our past, which is a confirmation that, again, consumers want sustainability and they have an intention to change their behavior. So we want sustainability. In fact, if you take a look at it, the market for sustainable products is growing. 93% of Americans in a recent poll have done something to conserve energy in the last 2 years. 82% of consumers are more likely to purchase a product that represents corporate social responsibility than one that does not. 75% of consumers would be more likely to buy a product or service if the company is making an effort to be sustainable. And 72% of consumers want to learn more about corporate sustainability initiatives. Which categories are growing the most? Well, I want to kind of explain this chart to you because in the format that I got, there's some typos in it. But if you look at fair trade, we're really looking at millions of pounds sold. In 2002, there were 9.8 million pounds of fair trade food transacted. By 2010, that number increased all the way to 152 million pounds. Organic food, in terms of billions of dollars, 7.4 to 29. Organic non-food, again in billions of dollars, 0.4 in 2002 to 2.2 in 2011. Green building went in 2005 from $3 billion to $54 billion, and renewable energy, things like wind and solar and bio, for instance, ethanol or even some forms of algae and sort of experimental models. 0.8 quadrillion BTUs way back in '02, increasing all the way to 3.6 quadrillion BTUs by 2011. This purchase behavior and what people are buying is especially true among millennials. In fact, millennials are twice as likely as boomers to own a hybrid automobile like a Prius, and 7 times as likely to own an electric car. So that's good news for Tesla. So here's the big question for all of us, in this virtual room tonight. How are we as marketers leading people forward? And there are a number of things that I'm going to, through the rest of this presentation, detail out for you, but they include realizing that the size of prize, meaning how large is the market in dollars, is not the question anymore. It is so not the question. The size of prize today is survival. And that means that we have to shift away from this ridiculous focus on 3-month returns, because in my mind, focus in terms like that is dangerous and myopic. We've seen now that consumer demand for green is growing significantly. I'm going to be showing you how brand and product differentiation are leading to a whole host of green items. But what's really important is that sustainability alone is not enough to justify higher prices. Consumers don't want to pay more for green products. So if we think about my opening comment about the conversation that my wife Karen and I had, she said, well, I like steak. And consumers are saying, well, I like convenience. And yeah, I do like steak. And I like transportation where I own my own car. Those are nice to haves, convenience things, right? Luxury things in some ways. And so marketers are saying, how are we going to continue to please the consumer while doing it under the mandatory requirement, if we all want to stay alive, you guys, that we do it in a greener way? Because it's important to build consumer confidence. And building consumer confidence is also all about having the data to share with them that they can buy and agree on the fact that you truly are a green marketer and not dishing out greenwashing. For instance, one example that tells a story about this greenwashing thing could be what VW did last year with, the way they had been cheating the emissions tests. And of course, the major negative impact it's had on VW since then. It's also going to require top-down leadership. If you look at, for instance, and we'll talk a little bit later about BMW, but for an example, BMW has a chief sustainability officer, and they have sustainability managers and teams throughout their organization. They have them in operations, and they have them in finance, and they have them in market. They have them throughout. It's ubiquitous. It's part of their culture, which is the next point here, which is not only do we need top-down leadership, but that leadership is going to have to put things in place that empowers culture change. So one example of green as a tiebreaker, or green being an additional benefit to whatever else the company's doing, can be seen, for instance, in the clothing industry, where H&M recently has come out with a new line of clothing that's where the textiles and the cottons are grown in a sustainable way, and the manufacturing in their textile industry has also become a whole lot less carbon emitting. So I want to show you an ad for that. This is stars Olivia Wilde, and you can see kind of how they're going about the process of marketing, what they're talking about. Let me back it up. I'm sorry for the delay. My bad. Here we go.
Creativity and sustainability aren't in opposition. Uncompromised consciousness. style and awareness, not one or the other. That's how I think fashion should always be.
Okay. Well, so that's what's happening, for instance, in clothing. But we've also seen it in the automotive industry, and here's the Prius, for instance, right? And I think Toyota's had this for about 10 years or so. And they're on their umpteenth model of this car now, but doing quite well with it. And if you also take a look at, another example, well, Solar City, which is Elon Musk's other company. Solar City is really transforming the way solar energy is marketed. It used to be that if you wanted a solar roof, you had to go out and invest in, all of the panels and have them installed on your roof, and then you create your own energy. Now Solar City says, hey, you don't have enough money to do that? We'll install it for you for free. And then we'll sell you back the energy as if we were the energy company or the electrical company. In addition, if your home produces an excess of energy, more than you can use, they take that and they sell it back to the grid. So it's very, very interesting what they've done there. Here's a model of the traditional product life cycle. This is something that we've all known since college, right, with the familiar 4 phases of introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Yet in sustainability marketing, they're really standing this model on its head. And it's no longer a linear model like this. Instead, it's become a circular model. And they're even referring to businesses that operate in this fashion as part of the circular economy. So the sustainable life cycle starts over here, right? And in this instance, we're looking at pre-production, the acquiring or acquisition of raw materials. And as we pull those raw materials from the earth, are we pulling them in a sustainable fashion, or are we pulling it at a rate that's far greater than the earth can ever, replenish? And as we pull those raw materials out, let's say this is the metals mining industry, are we leaching chemicals into the water supply, or are we doing other things that are injurious to the planet or not? Phase 2 is the whole production phase. You've got manufacturing, you've got assembly, you've got finishing. And in each of those 3 areas, what's happening, again, from a emissions perspective and a carbon footprint perspective? If you go to the next phase in distribution, getting products to market, again, what's the impact? From a product use perspective, well, first of all of this from pre-production through distribution, this is really all on the supplier and the intermediary side of the equation. Now, from here forward, product uses, imagine you buy a pair of jeans. What is the carbon footprint over the life of that pair of jeans due to the use of your washer and dryer and the soaps that you've had to use on those jeans, etc., right? So that's kind of the use factor. And then disposal, in terms of, like, for instance, consider for a second disposable clothing, right? Where you buy it once, you wear it, and it winds up in the landfill. Well, what is the carbon footprint of something like that? Instead, if we can find ways to recycle our products, for instance, one of the clients that I have in my business is an electronics recycling business or service firm. And what they do is they'll go into businesses that, are getting rid of their hard drives and other things, other assets they have, and rather than landfilling them out, or selling it on a cheaper market, this company comes up and recycles it. Big problem with, for instance, disposing of hard drives is inside those hard drives, there's a lot of very expensive silver and gold. A lot of folks in the market will go get those things, bring them back to China, where they're melted down for separation of the precious minerals, and the plastics are, and the burning of those plastics have a horrible carbon footprint, right? So what can we do instead of those things? We can put all that kind of information together. The next slide will show you this, but in a thing called a socio-ecological impact matrix, which looks like this. So for instance, here are each of the 5 phases of that life cycle. Right? You've got extraction of raw materials as the first phase, manufacturing, the use, and the disposal, or the afterlife. And then in this phase, going up and down here, we're looking at, for instance, resource use and extraction of raw materials. This is high impact on an eco basis. Medium impact, everything that's lighter green would come in the extraction, the product manufacturing, and the use, and low impact is everything that's in white. So by being able to identify where the impacts occur before we put the business model together, we're also in a position of saying, well, plan A is not really a great plan from an environmental perspective. What does plan B and plan C and so on look like, so that we can proactively decide a better course of action than maybe the conservative, tried and true historic ways of doing things. We talked a little bit in the area back here in terms of disposal, recycling and reusing and et cetera, which has opened up a whole new area in the economy called a circular business model. And so I want to show you a promotion that Uber and Goodwill did just a year ago that they called their spring cleaning promotion. This was from a website called Sustainable Brands, The Bridge to Better Brands. The title of this article is Uber and Goodwill Partner to Make Spring Cleaning Simple and Easy. And I won't read the whole thing to you, just the opening, where it says spring cleaning this year just got a little easier. On Saturday, May 2nd, donating old clothes will be a breeze, thanks to a partnership between Goodwill and Uber. Donors can open the Uber app on Saturday, select the Give option at the bottom of the screen, and request a pickup for their donations to be delivered directly to their local Goodwill, free of charge. This is the first time Goodwill and Uber have partnered on a full-scale, nationwide campaign to combine the power of donating with the convenience of ordering a ride. The partnership is available in more than 50 cities across the nation and in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where both Uber and Goodwill also have operations. So this is amazing, right? I mean, here's Uber, is a fairly new organization. This was a really strong promotion for them because it brought their name to a whole lot of new households than maybe have been aware of the brand before. It provided those households with a great service to, get rid of clothing rather than landfilling it, finding a way to get it to Goodwill where it's going to extend the product life cycle. Therefore, if we don't have to create new clothing with all of the incumbent, waste and emissions and everything else that happens, if we can extend the life through Goodwill or other ways of doing it, then we've done the world a lot of good. So Goodwill wins, people that need that clothing wins, the homeowners win, Uber wins, amazing promotion, right? I also mentioned that it's all about really how are we solving consumer needs. And, so as we go about finding ways to provide, continuing to provide convenience, there are ways that we can create more convenience for consumers while at the same time improving the carbon footprint that our convenience-based lifestyle has on the globe. So there's a couple of really interesting products to look at and a couple of ads I want to show you. One of them is called Need to Talk, and this is an ad that's promoting a new mobile app. Here we go.
We need to talk about robot. Look, I love the way he controls the lights, and I'm not so dumb when I forget my keys. It's just that I feel like he's always watching us. Yes, that's why
we should just use Wink. Look, it can monitor and manage our house, but it won't develop human emotions.
Hey, buddy.
Control your entire home with one simple app. Introducing Link. It's like a robot butler, but not as awkward.
Honey, we need to talk about robot butler.
So, kind of cool, right? It's an app that adds convenience to your life while also giving you the opportunity to proactively think more green in your own private lifestyle. So that when you go back to that consumer confidence index and you think about how, responsibly are you living, with an app like that, you can really, up your game significantly. And then, of course, North Face has a product called their Backyard Hoodie. And in this case, the idea was to reduce the number of miles. In food industry, you call it food miles, but really in any industry where you're using raw materials from the earth, reducing the number of miles required to go from grow to produce to distribution can be really significant in terms of how we can, lower our carbon footprint. So I want to show you this.
When they were introduced to this local farmer who had this beautiful bale of naturally colored cotton, and then we started to think, what could we do with this? How could we make this into a product?
Hobby, since I was really tiny, was going through and guessing what the fiber contents of everything was. I started doing evaluations of every single plant that I saved in my breeding program. You do this year after year. It usually takes 8 to 10 years of single plant selection before you have an actual variety.
What's really special about Sally's cotton is it's an heirloom variety that has a color just naturally embedded in it. The goal for the Backyard Project was to create a product from seed to garment within 150 miles of our headquarters in California. The Martins are the other farmers that grow the Sustainable Cotton Project Cleaner Cotton, and we mixed that with Sally's cotton to make a hoodie. We've been really interested in looking at local sourcing for a while, and Rebecca from FiberShed was the person that really helped us make that happen.
So the Sustainable Cotton Project mitigates the use of a huge list of herbicides and pesticides, and by not using those, they're keeping them out of our environment.
Most of the cotton grown in California doesn't stay in California. The fact that we had growers in our project who wanted to know where that cotton was going and wanted to keep, kind of a local name to it was something really different.
One of the challenges we tasked ourselves with was to reduce the fabric waste as much as possible by creating a really efficient pattern. Although we didn't meet the 150-mile challenge, we came really close. The yarn is spun and knit on the East Coast. From there, it comes back to San Francisco, where the product is cut and sewn into the hoodie itself.
So right now, it's a right side, left side, unless you put the inside pocket.
The way the apparel industry works today, you don't always get these personal connections and these networks, and this new approach, which is really an old approach, just going back to your roots and connecting to the farmers and local artisans and seamstresses and craftspeople. It really is just a unique way to look at the supply chain and go back to how things were done before.
My business has changed tremendously. At first it was small, then it grew very large very quickly. Then it all collapsed with the American textile industry collapse. And now it feels like it's happening. It's slowly rising up again.
So, it's a little bit similar to the idea of, local produce, right? And the local farm and reducing food miles that way. but it's taking it in a new direction that we haven't seen before. Just before I transition to that, I also want to show you guys, maybe remind you of an ad that Patagonia did some time ago, where they're marketing a jacket, and can you imagine a headline that says this, "Don't buy this jacket"? And if you get into the sell copy behind this ad, what they're promoting is actually buy it, right? But what the promise is, this jacket is going to last a long time, because when you get into the copy itself, it's saying that if you've already got a jacket that is going to last you forever, don't buy this one, because you don't need another one. In fact, we don't want to sell you things that you don't need. But however, if you don't have anything like that, and they're pretty sure at Patagonia that you don't, then this is exactly the one that they want to sell you. And they're quite happy, literally, if this is the last jacket that you ever buy from them. So kind of, take that in consideration with industries that are all based and built on planned obsolescence, right? But what is the global environmental impact of planned obsolescence? Like, I'd love to know Apple Computer's footprint with all of the iterations of iPhone and iPod that there have been over the last 10 years or so. Okay, so we're talking a lot about product development. And from that perspective, we're not suggesting to anybody that you're going to take your organization overnight from, where we are today, and we're all various stages and forms of polluters, to zero carbon footprint, although that would be a really ideal place to end up. We recognize that this is a transition. There's stages that you're going to go through from beginning to the ideal state, if we can ever get there. But the charts I'm going to show you now are built on two axes. One, this vertical axis here, talks about eco-efficiency improvements in the product that you're launching. And in this direction here, we're talking about length of time to get there, including development time and ramp-up time. So here's kind of the way it goes. A type 1 product improvement might be a line extension, right? It's going to represent a possible step towards sustainable products in the future. So when Detroit launches, the next Ford, what happens? If we can reduce our emissions maybe 10, 15%, possibly. Well, being able to reduce using existing technology and another line extension that moves in a positive direction, but only a small leap in this vertical distance here with eco-efficiency, is not a big win, but it is a thing we can launch pretty quickly here, given the length of this space from here to here. So maybe lower emissions, right? Okay, next phase. A product redesign that actually has a more profound change in the overall technology at hand is going to also yield a bigger improvement from maybe a starting point here to, where it's going to come out at. But it takes longer to arrive there. And examples of that could be a Prius, for instance, right? So it's a product redesign. When Toyota launched that Prius, it was a hybrid engine, both electric and gas. And the next phase would be called a function innovation. So notice that with the function innovation, the improvement is much larger. It's maybe here on the vertical axis. And of course, it takes a lot longer to arrive at something like that too. So an example of that could be a company like Mobility. Mobility is all about car sharing. So the idea is, rather than everybody owns their own car, maybe a better model could be, think of your car as ownership in a timeshare. You don't own that condo 52 weeks a year. You maybe only own it 1 or 2 weeks a year. So rather than owning that car 24 hours a day, maybe you only own it for a few hours in the day. And participating in Mobility gives you access to other people whose schedules conform to yours, and across a group of people, you're only altogether owning one car. So that's a major improvement in terms of, the impact that transportation and the automobile has on global warming. Of course, the final step is a system innovation. This is where we're really rethinking completely a whole new paradigm in transportation. There are actually cities in South America where they're moving from car culture kinds of cities to cities that are totally based on mass transit. It's a little bit like, people who ride into New York every day on the subway or the train. They're not parking in the city and they're not taking individual cars into town. They're all using mass transit, and the carbon footprint because of it is so much better. Well, imagine if we could take that and wholesale change Los Angeles. And actually, why not? Back in the 40s and 50s, I don't know how many of you guys know this or not, at one time, LA was mostly a mass transit culture. But what happened was the auto companies and the petroleum companies came in, and they bought up all the light rail tracks, and they tore it out because they forecasted the massive population explosion that we've had here, and they knew if there was no mass transit, there were going to be a hell of a lot of cars sold and a hell of a lot of gas sold. Well, if we can go in that one direction, mass transit to a car culture, certainly given the threat that we're living under today, we can hopefully turn it the other direction as well. And this type 4 innovation is what would be required to do that. Okay, so we talked a lot about, greenwashing and the negative impact that it's had on consumers. So one of the things that corporations who are really leading in this direction are doing is they're really stepping up, and they're saying, we understand that you've had some bad done to you, Mr. Consumer. Let us make it right by showing you and sharing with you all of the data that we've got and proving our case to you that what we're telling you is real and true, and you can have confidence in our promises. So it's all about providing consumers with more transparency. Ford Motor Company about this topic said, sustainability reporting doesn't only demonstrate transparency, but in our view, in the basis of organizational learning, demonstrates our values and both reflects and drives outstanding economic, environmental, and social performance. And Unilever, who we'll revisit in a minute, says, for businesses, reporting on social and environmental impact has become an imperative. Stakeholders of all types demand information beyond governance practices and financial accountability. And companies are recognizing the inherent value in engaging with those stakeholders on sustainability and social responsibility, from elevating reputation to anticipating resource scarcity and talent needs, to moving beyond risk mitigation to drive innovation. The Governance and Accountability Institute finds that as of 2015, 75% of Standard & Poor's 500 companies are producing an annual sustainability or corporate responsibility report, one of these things here, up from just under 20% in 2011. Now, leading companies are going beyond static reporting cycles to steadily communicate what impact they are having on the world. So here's an example of what Unilever is doing in this fashion. Hold on, you guys. I didn't leverage that up. I'll have to come in this way. Thanks, and sorry for the delay. So this is from their website, their corporate website. They say the world is changing, climate change is here. Temperatures are rising. Water shortages are more frequent. Food supplies are increasingly scarce. Populations are growing fast, making basic hygiene and sanitation even more of a challenge. and stretching the planet's resources further still.
Climate change is already disrupting businesses, people's lives, countries' economies. We can see that happening in Sao Paulo, suffering from lack of water, or in Bolivia, suffering from floods that have destroyed large parts of their agricultural processes. And we see that in Africa, in Asia, even in Europe. It's happening worldwide. So as societies, as civil societies and businesses and governments, we do have to join hands and do something together.
Okay. If you're a business trying to make this about how to move forward with production and operations and marketing and product development and everything else, there's such an awful lot of information that needs to be taken into account. It can actually really be bewildering. There's a system been put in place that actually makes the availability of that data and the use of that information in really pragmatic ways something that's very attainable now and very much within reach of the business leaders that need this information. That project that put this together was called the Earth Genome. And I want to show you what the Earth Genome looks like. Earth Genome translates big environmental data to transforming decision making. On a changing planet, you need big environmental data. Risk and uncertainty are growing daily on planet Earth. That's why more and more decision makers, from corporate executives and investors and policymakers and municipal officials, now understand that they need pinpoint insight from the staggering amounts of big environmental data being collected across the globe. The former Walmart executive VP of Corporate Affairs, Leslie Dosh, said, if that kind of information was decisions available, every company would use it. But while raw environmental data is growing, its use for decision making is lagging significantly. Why? Because the state of big environmental data today is like the internet without search. So overwhelming in its quantity, complexity, and disaggregation that it's rendered virtually useless. The biggest problem, missing translation of data into financial value. The effort to harness big environmental data has so far been much more costly than the value it yields. Introduce now the Earth Genome, elevating the complex to the simple. The Earth Genome is devoted to flipping the cost-value equation to maximize the value of big data while minimizing the cost of accessing and using it. Over the last 2 years, we've consulted with some of the biggest names in industry, from Dow to Bloomberg to BlackRock, about how to make big environmental data relevant to the challenges and decisions they face. They told us they wanted solutions, not another risk analysis, insights that could be expressed in financial terms, and simple, easy-to-use tools. And that's what this Earth Genome has provided. So not only is it about corporations being transparent about what's happening in their organizations, but it's also about those corporations' own need for information that they can manage and use proactively to make better decisions going forward. One of the last points I want to make is about culture change and senior leadership in our corporations. C-level managers are now being C-level managers in sustainability, I want to say, are being added to major corporations across the globe now. BMW is one such example. You know, what they've done is they've got actually at BMW a chief sustainability officer, and that officer then creates initiative requirements for all of the other departments in the organization. So when BMW is creating another luxury automobile, sustainability has to play a role. When they go to making decisions about how their manufacturing plants are operating, they've got major task forces in place to make sure that they are making really deliberate decisions about how green can they possibly be? Another important area is, packaging. And while I talk about packaging, of course that comes, brings to mind plastics, right? There's a thing out there called the Pacific Garbage Patch, and I don't know how much you guys know about this, but imagine these statistics, right? This Pacific Garbage Patch weighs 7 million tons. And the way that it's formed is that when people discard their plastic trash and they leave it on the roadside or out in the countryside, or it makes its way into the waterways, into our streams and rivers, or it goes through the sewage systems, whatever, and out finally into the water, it then rides on the ocean currents, these things they call gyres, until it's all aggregated from, imagine, the entire Pacific Rim, right, contributing to this mess, until you've got a problem that's 7 million tons big. It occupies a space that's twice as large as Texas, for crying out loud. That thing is up to 9 feet deep into the water. If you took a look at the ratio between live plankton, which is like the basic level of the food chain in the ocean, and plastic, there's 6 times more plastic in the ocean now than there is plankton. The Pacific Ocean has become the largest plastic dump on Earth. In fact, it's 80% plastic. Scripps Institute, Oceanic Institute, has said that the ocean is now, and the fish in the ocean are 5 to 10% of the fish there contain plastic, you guys. So we have to do something about the materials that we're packaging our products in. A leader in that would have been Coca-Cola, where they've introduced the use of bioplastics in a big way. In the last several years, Coke has produced 25 billion units, 25 billion, products, right? Bottles of Coke sold in 40 countries that are made with bioplastic. That's had a financial advantage to them, and the fact that they've been able to save over 500,000 barrels of oil. But not only that, it's also had a major improvement in terms of the emissions, because we're not having to process that oil. We're also making packaging leaner. Packaging size is getting smaller, but it's also getting lighter. So if you think about the last time you had a bottle of water, maybe you noticed how lightweight it is. It's very flimsy. You take the water out, it almost has no substance at all. So the packaging has gotten much lighter. We're also using fewer materials in our packaging. We're looking at recycled packaging as another opportunity, where a brand's packaging material has been sourced from, what materials have been used for the packaging, and whether the packaging can be recycled. All of these issues are related to the recyclability. And you guys, that's pretty much what I had for you. To kind of, sum it up. Obviously, we're on a very dire strait. Consumers want change. Leading corporations are taking many different kinds of steps, from product development to, looking at whole different kinds of economies, to rethinking the way that they package their products, to, changing the culture and the leadership within their organizations, and so on. And, as we go back to work in our own companies, I hope that we can take some of this with us and, bring some of it to light and share some of it with our management teams. At this point, I'd really like to open up the conversation for thoughts from you, or some questions that I might be able to answer. And I also want to thank you for your attention over this period.
Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely.
Good job. Good job. Are there any questions? Unmute your phone.
It's a really good presentation.
Well, thank you.
One of the questions I have is, as a marketer, what type of, and I've had some stints, with sustainability products and eco-friendly products and things of that nature. I'm trying to figure out what's the best set of skills that these companies will be looking for in a senior marketing leader.
I think if you can call vision a skill, I think that's one. A vision to begin to rethink how we've done things in the past and come up with new solutions. I think that's huge. I think another thing is, the ability to conceive of, solutions to customer needs that, while not maybe explicitly marketing to sustainability, always include that sustainability as a really major underpinning of any new product. Who are, we didn't get into this tonight, but there are, if you took a look at consumer lifestyles, there's a whole range from people who are, really, really passionate about the subject like I am, to people who are totally have their head in the sand and are climate deniers. They might as well go run for Congress and get jobs there. They fit right in. And it's about changing those attitudes as well, because this is, we're really talking about changing our organizations from the top down, which is going to create, like any time there's change, it's going to require a lot of, patience and boldness and courage on the part of the people being asked to execute all those changes, as much as there is leadership and vision required by the people who are leading the organizations. So there's a lot of onboarding that has to happen, and people have to be made believers. It's so convenient to ignore what's happening because we don't see this happening around us. You really don't. We don't see the Pacific garbage patch, and you don't see all the carbon that's being sent up into the atmosphere on a daily basis, and we don't see landfill. So it's easy to ignore and forget and put our head in the sand, but we're no longer in a position where we can live that way anymore. So I think those are important skills.
Oh, it's a good point. Good point.
Okay, Joe. I have any other questions?
No, I really thank you guys for joining in tonight. I hope this was, informative and somehow useful. And if you guys are interested, I'd be happy to give you guys a link to this file on Dropbox. Greg has everybody's email addresses, I think. Yes, Greg?
I do.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, if there aren't any more. Going once? Going twice? Thank you for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right, good job.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I hope it came across well. I enjoyed doing it. Do we want to offer this again, or are we done with this topic?